In 1938, Neville Chamberlain stood on the tarmac in London, waving a piece of paper he claimed would bring peace for our time. Britain thought it was buying stability with Hitler, but we all know how that ended. As Winston Churchill warned, appeasement is nothing more than feeding a crocodile, hoping it eats you last. After Hamas's attack on Israel, the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom have chosen to feed the crocodile again. This time, not with territory, but by recognizing a Palestinian state. For a long time, A2 was generally for a two-state solution. Many wars had been fought in the past, and I strongly felt the way forward was economic prosperity for Palestinians, which could possibly de-radicalize them towards Israelis. Of course, this all changed on October 7th, and after October 7th, I saw in Australia a society that had changed almost by stealth, and a strong red-green alliance using this opportunity to subvert many countries across the Western world. And for many of them, the ultimate goal wasn't a two-state solution. It was one where Israel did not exist, and they certainly do not make that a secret. This week, the UK, Canada, and Australia moved in lockstep to announce recognition of a Palestinian state, timed deliberately ahead of the UN meetings in New York. Their leaders insisted this was about keeping the two-state solution alive, and stressed it was not, in their own words, a reward for Hamas. Of course, this isn't true. Hamas themselves have congratulated these countries, and here's how they themselves perceive it.
اليوم ليش كل الدول أعطيني بس أقول لك مثل ليش كل الدول أصبحت تعترف بفلسطين الآن؟ قبل 7 أكتوبر هل في دولة تجرأت على أن تعترف بدولة فلسطين؟ أعطيني بس من ذلك. الآن حصاد 7 أكتوبر هو الذي خلى كل العالم يفتح عيونه على القضية الفلسطينية.
But we do need to cut the shit here. These countries are making this largely meaningless move not because they envision some peaceful, Wakanda-like Palestinian utopia. It's because all three countries over the past decade have seen an increase in their Muslim population and now need them to stay in power. From the Muslim Votes Matter bloc to politicians almost looking like they've been held hostage, like this video here.
You were there for me, and I don't believe I could have done that without you. Now, I know that people are angry about what's happening in the Middle East, and I said live on TV, and I say to this day, if me resigning as an MP now would bring a ceasefire, I would do it. I would do it. If I could affect change, the only thing I've done, and Waj knows this, I got 3 British doctors out.
But beyond the virtue signalling, there are many reasons as to why recognition isn't the pathway, at least for now. The first and most obvious problem is that there is no single Palestinian government to even recognize. In the West Bank, you've got Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, unelected, corrupt, and clinging to power since 2006. In Gaza, you've got Hamas, a terror organization that literally threw Fatah officials off rooftops when it took over. There hasn't been a national election in almost 20 years. These are two rival authorities who can't agree on anything except hating Israel. So tell me, who exactly is supposed to run this state? Which flag do we salute? Who controls the borders? Who enforces the law? Right now, the answer is no one. And that fails the most basic test of statehood. An effective government that can actually govern. Recognition at this stage does the opposite of what's needed. Instead of pushing the Palestinians to reform, hold elections, and unify under one legitimate authority, it rewards the fracture. You don't upgrade a fractured polity to sovereignty. You fix the fracture first. And by the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, please hit that like button, subscribe, and consider signing up to Patreon. And then there's the obvious border question. Everyone throws around the phrase 1967 lines subject to swaps, but those swaps aren't agreed, and Jerusalem, the most contentious issue of all, is not agreed. Over 700,000 Israelis now live beyond the Green Line, and East Jerusalem has been annexed de facto for decades. Not even modern protesters can agree. And we cannot ignore security. Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, dismantled every settlement, and even dug up its own graves, hoping this would bring calm. What did they get? More than 20,000 rockets over the years, and finally, the October 7 massacre. Hamas is still armed to the teeth and fully in control of Gaza. So let's be blunt, a state that includes Gaza without disarmament and enforcement is nothing but a legalized rocket base. Israel will never accept it, and frankly, no responsible government would. Statehood cannot precede disarmament. International law also says a state needs 4 things: a population, a defined territory, a functioning government, and the capacity to uphold obligations. Right now, the Palestinians only meet the first one. Governance is divided, territory is disputed, and the PA can't even collect garbage without foreign aid. Corruption is endemic, institutions are weak, and the democratic mandate expired long ago. If you recognize this as a state, you aren't creating sovereignty. You're creating a paper state that can't deliver on its responsibilities, least of all the responsibility to prevent attacks from its soil. Every serious peace framework, Oslo, the roadmap, even the Arab Peace Initiative put statehood at the end of the process, not the beginning. Build institutions, negotiate borders, disarm militants, then declare a state. Recognition flips that on its head. It hands out the prize before the work is done. And finally, the incentives. Hamas immediately declared the recognitions of victory. Think about that. The worst terror attack in Israel's history, and within a year, Hamas can point to 3 Western governments recognizing Palestine as proof that violence works. That message doesn't only resonate in Gaza, it travels. It tells radicals everywhere that if you kill enough civilians, eventually the West will buckle. When violence pays, you get more violence. And in the process, moderates, both Palestinian and Israeli, get weakened while extremists are strengthened. That's the exact opposite of what we should be encouraging. And it's not just governments, it's the propaganda shaping this conflict online. Protecting yourself matters today more than anything. That's exactly why I use Proton VPN and why I think you should too. They're based in Switzerland, outside the reach of US, EU, UK, and Australian law. They don't keep logs and are built by the same team behind Proton Mail. When the UK passed its surveillance laws, Proton VPN became the #1 app on the App Store. Their stealth protocol beats censorship firewalls. Secure Core routes your traffic through privacy-first countries, and NetShield blocks trackers before they ever reach you. I've used Proton Mail since Australia announced sweeping surveillance laws last year, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's now essential. If you want to protect your privacy and support this channel, hit the link below to get up to 60% off Proton VPN. Now, none of this is happening in a vacuum. We have 75 years of data on what works and what doesn't. Back in 1947, the United Nations literally drew up a map offering 2 states, one Jewish, one Arab. The Jewish agency swallowed hard, said yes, and prepared to build a country in whatever patchwork borders they were given. The Arab leadership said no, flat out. Instead of accepting partition, they chose war. The result wasn't a Palestinian state, it was catastrophe on both sides. And 75 years later, people still pay the price for that rejection. 2 decades later, in 1967, Israel had just fought off another existential war, capturing the West Bank, Gaza, and other territories. You might think that would have been the moment for a grand bargain, land for peace. Instead, the Arab League gathered in Khartoum and issued the famous 3 no's. No peace, no recognition, no negotiations. That hardline delayed any possibility of settlement for more than a decade. Fast forward to 2000, Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, backed by President Bill Clinton, put a sweeping offer on the table. Nearly all of the West Bank, all of Gaza, even a share in Jerusalem. Arafat walked away. He didn't even counteroffer. Clinton was furious, warning Arafat that he was leading his people to catastrophe. The Second Intifada broke out months later, and thousands died. At Taba the following year, they got closer still, but again, no signature, no state. In 2005, Israel tried something unilateral. They pulled every settler out of Gaza, dragged families out of homes, even dug up graves, on the hope that giving land without preconditions might buy peace. What came instead? Hamas took over, rockets rained down, and war after war followed. Land for peace only works if the other side actually wants peace. Then in 2008, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert made what many still call the most generous offer ever. About 95% of the West Bank, land swaps to cover the rest, East Jerusalem as a capital, and even an international arrangement for the Holy Basin. Abbas walked away. He cited refugees, timing, political risk, but the bottom line is he said no. And when maximal offers are refused and the world later rewards that refusal with recognition, the lesson learned is simple: hold out and eventually the world will deliver. Even in 2014, when John Kerry tried to revive talks, the pattern repeated. As soon as negotiations got tough, the Palestinian Authority pivoted to a unity deal with Hamas. Israel walked out, and another opportunity vanished because internal politics mattered more than peace. Again and again, when partition and compromise were on the table, leaders said no. Recognition now doesn't just ignore that record, it writes off all accountability, and it teaches the next generation that rejection, not compromise, is the winning strategy. Recognition at this moment is symbolism without substance. It doesn't free a single hostage, it doesn't draw a single border, and it doesn't disarm a single fighter in Gaza. What it does is give politicians in London, Ottawa, and Canberra something to wave around, the same way Chamberlain waved his piece of paper. History shows us that radical, militant ideologies don't dissolve because someone in a foreign capital wishes them away. Think about Imperial Japan. In the 1930s, it was fanatically expansionist, brutal to its neighbors, and utterly convinced of its divine mission. It wasn't a polite communique or premature recognition that transformed Japan into a peaceful democracy. It was defeat, demilitarization, and a complete rebuilding of its political institutions. Only then, after the change was real, did recognition and partnership follow. The lesson is simple. You don't start with sovereignty and hope for reform. You force reform first, and only then do you grant sovereignty. Until that happens, recognition isn't a step toward peace. It's just feeding the crocodile and hoping, against all evidence, that it won't bite. Hey, you made it to the end. As always, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and give the video a thumbs up. It really helps. A massive thank you to all my channel members and Patreon supporters. You're the reason I can keep making content like this. If you want to support the channel, consider joining the crew. Just hit the join button below or head over to Patreon. Even a small pledge goes a long way, and I would genuinely love to have you on board. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.